Right through the lonely night, right through the day, keep the herd moving on its way. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. You know, cowboys move great herds of cattle to the shipping points in Kansas, to the open range in Wyoming, and later on in Montana, through blistering heat, blinding snowstorms, swollen rivers, and sometimes fatal stampedes, all in a day's work for a cowboy. But through all that, the Chuck Wagon was home for the cowboy out on the range, the mailing address. That's where the cowboys came to sleep, to eat, to socialize, have a cup of coffee, tell a few tall tales. Sometimes they were called windy tales. You know, and I just have one of those windy tales for you. It's all about the Oriental Saloon stew that this lady by the name of Crazy Cora wanted for her last meal. Now, the Crazy Cora Oriental Saloon stew. Boy, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? Anyway, she wanted it, and it was actually a recipe that we got a hold of, and it was a stew that was cooked in the Oriental Saloon in Tombstone, Arizona, back in the 1880s. Now, as the story goes, Crazy Cora was tried and convicted for killing her husband. Now, she claimed by accident. And as it happened, by her own words, was now her husband was a drunkard. He came home from the saloon one night, drunker than a skunk, looking for a bottle. She had hidden the bottle. She was sitting by the kitchen table peeling potatoes, and he even tried to take a swing at her, and she ducked, and he missed, and he lost his balance, and he fell onto the knife. Now, if that's not an accident, I don't know what is. But anyway, Cora panicked, ran out of the house, the old man laying there in a pool of blood, and one of the ranch hands happened to come into the house to ask for some orders, and he saw his boss laying there in a pool of blood, and he ran out, jumped on his horse, and went into town. Well, on his way to town, crossing a little creek, he saw Crazy Cora sitting by the creek on a log, washing blood out of her dress. Now, that sealed it for him. There was no other way. Crazy Cora killed her husband, his boss. Now, he ran into town, and he got the sheriff, and the sheriff went back out to the ranch. Now, as if the sheriff come into the ranch and into the house, there was no body. Big pool of blood, potatoes laying all over, knife laying there, but no body. So anyway, he went back to town. They finally got a hold of Crazy Cora. They found her wandering around out on the prairie, all dazed. And well, they ended up trying her, and she was condemned to be hung. Now, a woman to be hung, you ever heard anything like that? But anyway, now they couldn't find an escort, so they shackled her to the window bars in the stagecoach, and they hauled her into Roundup. There she was supposed to be turned over to the sheriff, and then she was supposed to be hung, as the story goes, the following day. Now, all the way into town, she was driving the people on the stage, the Chuck on rider, and the stagecoach driver, she drove him crazy. She was ranting and raving. She didn't get anything to eat since the trial. And she was carrying on and telling them that she was going to starve to death before they got to hang her because nobody fed her all the way since the trial. Well, the sheriff got her unloaded and hauled her off to jail. And Crazy Cora not letting up on her, ranting and raving about being hungry and that she wanted to be fed. Crying the sheriff's patience, she let him know in no uncertain terms that she wanted Oriental Saloon stew for her last meal. The word got around town quickly that they had Crazy Cora in jail. And it was said that some of the townspeople that had known Crazy Cora's husband and even some of the saloon girls were up in arms about her being locked up. Some even said that the no-good drunkard deserved what he got. There were different opinions about the story, but no one liked the fact that a woman was going to be hung in their town. Now, in the meantime, Crazy Cora was carrying on and pestering the sheriff and keeping up a tirade about her not being fed and that she wanted Oriental Saloon stew. And finally, the sheriff gave in and he said, okay, I'm gonna go and talk to the cookie to see if he can cook you your Oriental Saloon stew if you only shut up. Hey, what you want, Sonny?
Cookie, do you know how to make Oriental Saloon stew?
Never heard of it.
Well, Crazy Cora wants it and she's driving me crazy.
Well, it's so damn important to her. Bring her out here and she cook her own damn last supper.
Well, that works as long as I can shut her up.
So after that, well, the sheriff went back to jail and he shackled up Crazy Cora and he brought her out to the Chuck Wagon. And there the woman actually gave the instructions to the cook to cook her own last meal. Now, if that isn't a tall tale or a windy tale like they said in those days, man, I don't know what is. But anyway, so we got a hold of this recipe of the Oriental Saloon stew. And so let's go over to the wagon, and I got all the stuff ready, and we'll cook ourselves a pot of Oriental Saloon stew. And man, I can hardly wait to taste it. Now, if she liked the full last meal, oh, it's gotta be good. Well, okay, now let's get to work. We have the Oriental Saloon stew. We need a 2.5 to 3 pounds of lean stew meat, cubed, a couple of teaspoons of unbleached flour, a teaspoon of paprika, sweet paprika, and 4 teaspoons of ground red chili or a chili powder. We gotta divide it, we gotta hold back a little bit, and a couple of teaspoons of salt. So that's what we're gonna start out with. And I have already prepared a little bit of the meat, but we'll take just a regular little stew meat and cut it into bite-sized cubes. Into a bowl, we combine the flour, the sweet paprika, or the chili powder or the red pepper, and the salt. And that is the mixture we coat the meat with for browning. 2 tablespoons of an unbleached flour. And in Crazy Cora's recipe, it called for actually a little bit more flour, but you're okay with the 2 tablespoons. And then we have the paprika. 2 teaspoons of paprika. And we got the chili powder. So we do 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Well, actually it does call for 4 tablespoons of chili powder. So there we go. And we need our salt. We have a couple of teaspoons of salt. Well, then we'll stir all of it together. So now that we got all that done, okay, now we're going to put in the meat. And with that much meat, we're probably going to have to brown 2 batches. So while my oil is heating in the frying pan, I'll finish coating the pieces of meat, and be sure that you get them really coated well. You don't want to see any more meat. All we're going to see is the coating. And then we get it into hot oil and we'll brown the meat and start on the stew. Okay, now, yep, it's nice and hot. Clean up the oil. Now, when you put in the meat, and I like to do it always, I like to bring the frying pan over to my table, because when you cook in the Dutch oven or in cast iron cookware, it will carry the heat for a long time. So you have the time to get everything organized, you know, right on the table, rather than staying over the hot fire. We got all the meat in it, and now we're going to go ahead and brown it. Oh boy, this is nice and brown. Here we go. Good stuff. We get it nice and brown. And now we're going to have to get the pot out. Actually, my bean pot, but today it's going to be stew pot. And then we're going to just take it out of the frying pan, right into the big pot, get everything out. Okay, I'm just getting all the vegetables ready, and we'll go over it quick and see what all we need for the stew. We have, by the recipe, we need 2 yellow onions diced and a clove of garlic, but always take in 2 or 3. You know, it's kind of depending. If you like garlic, put in a little more. If you don't, then by the recipe is 1 clove of garlic. And then we have a 20-ounce can of tomato. Well, I prefer to use a fresh tomato, but if you use fresh tomato, be sure you add a little more water to it, because the tomatoes really don't have that much moisture in them. And then we're going to the spices and the potatoes. We need 4 potatoes peeled and 4 carrots sliced. So I got everything ready. So why don't we just add it all to the stew. And before you know it, we have ourselves a pot of stew going. Okay, we got the rest of the onions. And we got the carrots. Tomato. Remember the water. Gotta add some to it. And the potatoes. Now I want you to know that these potatoes were ground right here in the little fictitious stone around it. Those are all potatoes. Okay, we got that. Okay, we got that. That. And now we're gonna go get the spices together, and then we can put it on the fire. Okay, so we're gonna need cinnamon, and we're gonna need crushed red pepper, and we're gonna need ground cumin, and we're gonna need some ground cloves. And then we're gonna combine all that in a little bowl, and then we get it into the stew, and then we have to add a few more things. I gotta crush up the garlic, and then again, like I said, we'll add a little water to it because of the tomatoes. So we need 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Now that's I would say that is about the secret ingredients in this whole mixture. And I suppose you could put in a little more or less to your taste. And then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves. Ooh, that smells good. And we got ground cumin. And now we're going to have a little bit of crushed red pepper. Now again, there you can go with a little more or less depending upon what your taste buds will like. I think a teaspoon of red in that much meat, I think would be okay. Okay, so we got all the spices together. And I'm going to go crush the garlic up, and then we can mix everything together and put it on the fire. Okay, when I crush my garlic, you can use garlic out of a jar too. But when I crush, I like to use fresh garlic, and I just put a little salt on the table, it acts like it holds the garlic in place, and it also makes it a little easier to crush it. Yeah. Yum, yum, yum. Okay. As you crush it, you kind of turn it into a bit of a paste. Now don't use too much salt, because you already have a little bit of salt in it, and you don't want to get it too salty. So you got to take that under consideration. So we'll put that in with our spices. Okay, so we got the last of it. Yeah. And now don't forget, we put in about a cup and a half of water. And there we all have the magic stew. So let's put it on the fire. So now we're ready to get the show on the road. Oh yeah, we got nice coals. Pushing them together a little bit. A little center heat here. Okay, we got that. Now get the stew on the fire. There we go. What else can we do? Let it get going, and remember that we had the flour mixture that we used to coat the meat. Whatever was left after we've been cooking for about an hour, check for the moisture. If you need a little moisture, put a little more water in it, but then add the flour mixture to it. And occasionally come in and go in and stir it up so it doesn't burn on the bottom. You're going to have to regulate the heat just by feeling whether this gets way too hot. You can tell, then hang your pot a little higher. But now we're going to have to leave it alone and prepare ourselves for some awful good Crazy Coral Saloon stew. Well, so let's see where we are. Ooh, looking mighty good. Looking mighty good. Coming along nicely. So we'll see. Yep. Now don't forget to put in the moisture, and later on we'll put in the rest of the flour. And we'll just let her simmer nice and easy, and we're in good shape. Well, now that we got the stew almost done, remember we have to put the last ingredients in it, and that is the leftover that we had from the seasoning that we used to brown the meat. So we'll put that in. Start up real good. Ooh, this is coming along nicely. Oh yeah. Almost done. Oh, beautiful. There we go. We're almost done, almost ready to eat it. I even put on some biscuits so we got something to get the sauce. So now that our stew is simmering for the last few minutes before it's done, let's go over one time and get back to what we exactly put together in order to cook this Oriental Saloon stew. Now we had 2.5 pounds of meat. I used the round steak, but you can also use the regular stew meat. We had 2 tablespoons of unbleached flour, a tablespoon of sweet paprika, 4 tablespoons of ground red chili or chili powder. We had 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil to brown the meat, 2 yellow onions, Oh, we diced them up really good. We crushed some garlic. And again, I use fresh tomatoes, but you can also use a 20-ounce can of stewing tomatoes or anything like that. It will be just fine. And we had a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. That's, I think, what gives it that special taste. And a half a teaspoon of ground cloves, a quarter teaspoon of ground cumin, a quarter teaspoon of crushed red pepper, and we cut up 4 potatoes, and we diced up 4 carrots. You know, you can use a little more, a little less, depending on how you like it. All right, now this has been simmering for a while. Oh yeah, this looks good. Ooh, I think I'm gonna have myself a bowl of Oriental Saloon stew. And we got fresh biscuit to boot. Yes, sir. Oh yeah, I'm waited for this all afternoon. Fresh biscuits. Oh yeah. Woo-hoo, hot. Fresh biscuits and some Oriental Saloon stew. Oh yeah. Now, the moment of truth has arrived. This is good. I'm not surprised she wanted that for her last meal. I mean, this stew is to die for. Wow. Well, you got fresh biscuits with it. How much better can life be? Now, this is about all the time we have for you today, but be sure to join us again next time on the Great American Wild West Roundup Chuck Wagon, a beef, beans, and biscuit show. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Right through the lonely night, right through the day, keep the herd moving on its way. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail.